3 months ago, I put together a video on Jalen Carter, drawing some comparisons to one former Seahawk great Cortez Kennedy, as I have looked through a lot of the prospects in this draft, and he was one guy that seemed to have a different level of talent to him. Superstar potential, if you will. Well, over the corresponding 3 months, Jalen Carter has had as precipitous a fall from grace as any prospect I've seen in recent history. This far surpasses the Laramie Tunsil gas mask video on draft day, or even the Warren Sapp failed drug tests reports that broke on him. This has certainly been much worse for the wear on Jalen Carter. And it began as he was going into the bowl games and the college playoffs to try to cement a second straight national title for his team, when people began to raise questions about his level of conditioning. He was getting gassed out a lot, saying that was the thing he needed to work on. And then we got to the college playoffs and he seemed to get gassed at every turn and be out of breath. And this got many worried about his level of work ethic involved. Then it got even a little bit worse, as on the morning of January 15th, just after the national title game, there was a racing incident where 2 people died as part of the Georgia program. And reportedly, Jalen Carter may have been racing along with them. Now, we didn't hear about this at the time. This had reportedly kind of happened, and maybe NFL teams were kind of vaguely aware of it. But we were hearing at this point from mainstream reporters that there were questions about his character. And maybe that there was a little bit some worries here involved with this guy in that respective thing. Then we get to the combine, and the incident from January 15th catches up to him as Georgia police issue an arrest warrant for him for 2 misdemeanor charges, just as he's basically arriving in combine before he's done any of the drills. He has to now rush back to Georgia, can't do any of the drills, don't even know if he was able to do really all of his interviews. But once again, his stock then takes another great hit, and everybody says at this point, look at all of the smoke, there must be fire. So you then have his last bastion of hope being his pro day, where maybe he can reclamate a little bit of this offseason, reintroduce himself back into the top 5 discussion. We get to the pro day, and he has, quite frankly, one of the most miserable pro days I've ever seen in recent history. It was brutal at every turn, as he could barely get through the initial bag drills, not even get into the time stuff, before he was completely gassed and done, on top of the fact that he showed up 10 pounds heavier than what he just weighed out at the combine 2 weeks prior. So it showed that he hadn't really been working for what was really going to be at that moment the most important job interview of his life. So is the light bulb just not going on with this kid? Is this all evidence of the fact that he's just not good enough for our Seahawks, and we're best at this point, no matter where he may lie in this draft, to just keep it moving along? Well, let's look at this as much as we can from a full frame view of things. Certainly, after getting the arrest warrants coming on the heels of a situation that was probably incredibly impactful in his life over these last few months with the death of people close to him, it's probably been tough to go out there and necessarily train at his best. I'm not trying to make any excuses for the kid. I'm just saying that it's understandable a 21-year-old kid is having things kind of turned upside down on him a little bit over these last few weeks. The timing of the arrest warrants by the Georgia police, I think, were very much purposeful and probably had their intended effect here in this situation, not only for Carter, but also I'm sure for the Georgia program, as far as maybe potentially trying to kind of send a little bit of a message here. Again, it's not to make an excuse, but all of this stuff has not added up to any good through the course of this offseason. It's led to bad. It has many people saying now John Schneider just automatically will take Carter off his list. And before you do remove Jalen Carter from your board, which I understand that may be the case, I would just lean in and say it from this standpoint where I lie. And that is that you and I are definitely exposed to a lot of information on these players more than ever before. We have insider reports, we've got unnamed sources, we've got metrics here and metrics there, and all these other things in between. So we do feel like we are fully armed with all of the information. But these NFL programs are going to send out private investigators to the program. They're going to have scouts who have contacts with the program. They're going to trust those direct sources that they have. And at the end of the day, we're going to be sitting on a very small stack of information compared to the very big stack of information that John Schneider is going to be able to operate in determining whether or not Jalen Carter is worth it, worth the potential risks. At this point, he's absolutely not the clean character guy that is Will Anderson. That is to be sure. But Will Anderson might not be available there. Carter might very well. You might have both at this point. Who knows the way this draft's going, but at the very least, you probably have Carter sitting there available for you to pick if you were to want him. And the thing that stands out to me is when we were hearing about the reports of this racing incident, and I was having discussions within my own chat about this situation, you heard a lot of people prognosticating about what they knew probably happened, that he just drove on, that he left his teammates to die, that he was only concerned with himself in the moment. And that's a little bit of what I think happens here when we don't have all of the information. And so then instead what we learn now is he has pleaded guilty to these charges and he's now going to be serving probationary time, but not any jail time because they are just misdemeanors, not felonies. He's not being charged for racing. He's not being charged for lying to the police. And another detail that is leaked out from this situation now is that we're learning he did call the police at the time. They did say he was okay to leave the scene, and then he did come back. So he looks a little bit less maybe like a bad guy to some of those other folks who were saying, look at how much more worse he probably actually is that isn't being reported about. The truth does eventually come out. And in this situation, the truth will come out with Jalen Carter, whether or not he's a character concern or not. And if John Schneider goes into this offseason and he gets that big file I talked about and he flips through all those pages and he comes to the end of it and Jalen Carter is a character risk, that these issues that have happened this offseason are merely the tip of the iceberg, then I'll trust in his decision-making in passing by Mr. Carter. But if that stuff, at least from a somewhat perspective, checks out, and Schneider feels that the squeeze is worth the juice, then I'm going to be very much in favor of taking Jalen Carter because he still does remain that special talent. You can worry all you want about the recent pro day, performance and that he didn't do anything at the combine, but this isn't the guy that you needed the combine or pro days to tell you who he is and what he is as a player. He is dominant. There is not going to be any question about whether or not he would help this team if he did arrive here. And I'm going to trust in the man that's armed with probably 95% more information on this guy than I have and let him guide this through. Because after all, Schneider does have a recent miss in Blake McDowell and being a guy that had those character concerns also surrounding him when he was coming into this league. And so he's been bit recently. He's not going to certainly feel like he's just never had a point of being hit when he's taken these kind of risks. But for him, I think that means all the much more he's going to dive into the details of this and truly get down to the bottom line. Either way, I will support his decision on this one, and I hope you do too. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
A lot of questions about Jalen, which probably was inevitable anyway, because when you start talking about, I got a lot of questions about Travon Walker when he came out. So there's a lot of questions generally, but with the situation, probably more questions and more direct. And just try to be honest and talk about the experiences we had with Jalen here, which Jalen did not have to come back and play after his first injury, nor after his second injury. And both times he wanted to overcome that injury. He begged us to put him in games he was hurt. So the competitive character he's shown, I think, has been really good. And I also think his teammates really respect Jalen. Like, Jalen earned the respect of his teammates. They love being around him. So that's a lot of the things you can say about him.
Hey, Kirby, to follow up on that, what was your sense in terms of his psyche when you visited with him yesterday, coming back?
I was glad he came out to practice. I thought it was important to get him back around the guys and be around some of them. I think him being isolated away from us for a while because he's been out working out and training is tough. And I can only imagine what he's dealing with internally, as a survivor from a tragic accident and knowing the outcome of that accident. There's some mental health things there that you have to be able to help with. And I can't speak to what he's going through. I think he's got to answer those questions, but we're certainly going to try to support him as much as we can.
Despite the off-the-field things when it comes to Jalen, just talent-wise, do you believe he should be a top pick in this year's draft?
Yeah, he's a generational talent. He's very talented. I've been around coaching for 18 years, and there's very few guys I've coached that have the talent that he